Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're diving into a genuinely cinematic and, frankly, severely undertold historical epic. We are going to explore how the ancient world's most successful and, honestly, unusually tolerant conqueror met a surprisingly brutal, faceless tragedy at the hands of an absolute force of nature, an unyielding warrior queen. It's a massive story, you guys. We're talking incredible empire building, fatal hubris, and a devastating clash between two entirely different worlds.
So, to really get this, we actually need to start our story somewhere way beyond the Jaxartes River, right out on the edge of the vast Central Asian steppe. Picture this, a solitary leather skin, just resting there in the tall grass. This is a delivery waiting for a queen named Tamaris. She's the ruler of the nomadic Massagetea people. Now, Persian scouts had promised their king that taking down Tamaris would be an easy final conquest. But inside that leather bag, it's filled with human blood. And submerged right in the middle of it is the severed head of the very king who tried to conquer her.
Yeah, that grisly delivery came with a bone-chilling message from Queen Tomiris herself. She said, "You wanted blood? Now drink your fill." And the crazy thing is, the king inside that bag wasn't just some local warlord. No, this was Cyrus the Great, the literal founder of the Achaemenid Persian Empire. By almost every measure, this guy was the most successful conqueror the world had ever seen, ruling a massive empire that stretched all the way from the Aegean Sea to the Indus River.
Part 1. The Architect of Empire.
So how exactly does a man who's famous throughout history for his unprecedented mercy end up in such a violent, faceless tragedy? Well, it all starts with his meteoric rise. Cyrus actually began as just a vassal king in a place called Anshan. But around 550 BCE, he overthrew his Median overlords, and he pulled this off largely because their own army decided to defect to him. Next up, he completely outmaneuvers the fabulously wealthy King Croesus of Lydia, taking the legendary citadel of Sardis. Finally, he sets his sights on the ultimate prize, Babylon. But here's the kicker. Cyrus didn't smash through its massive walls like a typical conqueror. Nope. He marched right in as a liberator, claiming he was chosen by Babylon's own gods to restore order. It was brilliant. But what happened immediately after capturing Babylon is what really cemented his legacy for millennia. Have you ever heard of the Cyrus Cylinder? It's this famous artifact that records his completely revolutionary policy. Instead of crushing the people he conquered, which was the standard playbook back then, he restored them. Most famously, he allowed the Judean exiles to return to Jerusalem and actually rebuild their temple. I mean, the impact of this was so profound that the Hebrew Bible actually refers to this foreign, Persian king as a Messiah, the anointed one. That is huge. Which brings us to part 2, ruling without erasing. You see, this was an empire deliberately built to absorb differences rather than erase them. And this strategy? It brought incredible stability to a sprawling territory that totally would have fractured under forced assimilation. Just imagine it. On one side, you have this rich Persian imperial purple, a multi-ethnic empire connected by these hyper-efficient royal roads and governed by smooth diplomacy. But on the other side, out in the steppe ochre, you have the Massagetai. They were this fierce, nomadic confederation living across the Jaxartes River who valued absolute independence and razor-clear borders. And let me tell you, they had zero interest in being absorbed into anyone's empire. What's wild is that even Cyrus's enemies were in awe of him. The Greek historian Xenophon literally wrote an entire, idealized biography of Cyrus. He called him a model of virtuous kingship. Think about that for a second. When even rival Greek writers are holding you up as the ultimate standard of an enlightened ruler, you know you've built an untouchable reputation. And honestly, that is exactly what makes his late-reign campaign against the Massagetai feel so incredibly jarring and out of character. Part 3. The Warrior Queen's Warning. All right, so hoping to secure his northeastern frontier once and for all, Cyrus tries his usual diplomacy and offers a marriage alliance to Queen Tomiris. But Tomiris? She sees right through it. Recognizing it as a thinly veiled land grab, she bluntly rejects him. She basically tells him, stay on your side of the river. But Cyrus? He fatally ignores her warning. A crack begins to form in his perfect record. He marches his immense forces right across the winding Jaxartes River, crossing that physical and psychological boundary that separated the settled world of cities from the wild, untamed, nomadic territory. Once he gets across, Cyrus decides to use a deceptive, psychological trap. He purposefully leaves behind a fully stocked camp. We're talking tents filled to the brim with rich food and really heavy wine. He then orders his main forces to pull back and withdraw, actively luring the Massagetei into a false sense of security. And you know what? The trap worked perfectly. A detachment of Massagetei warriors, who happened to be led by Queen Tomiris' own son, Spark Apices, stumbles upon this unattended feast. Now, these nomadic warriors were completely unfamiliar with the intoxicating effects of such heavy, concentrated wine, so they drank themselves into an absolute stupor, entirely unprepared for the ambush that was creeping up on them. The ambush was swift, and the slaughter was devastating. The Persian forces returned and massacred the incapacitated warriors right where they lay. Spargapaces was taken captive, and, humiliated by the deception and the sheer shame of his capture, the young prince tragically took his own life while sitting in Persian custody. Part 4. Death on the Steppe. When Queen Tomiris heard the news of her son's death, her reaction was just absolute fury. She sent a message to Cyrus promising him ultimate vengeance, and she fully mobilized her entire nomadic force for a total, uncompromising war. The ancient historian Herodotus actually described what happened next as the fiercest battle ever fought between non-Greek peoples. Out there on the dusk plains, with broken banners in the wind, Cyrus's lifelong strategy of simply absorbing his enemies completely fell apart. He wasn't fighting a settled king who could just be bought off with some gold or fancy title. He was fighting a people desperately defending their freedom, led by a mother avenging her dead son. And in the chaos of this fierce, brutal battle, Cyrus the Great fell. True to her word, Queen Tomiris scoured the blood-soaked battlefield until she found his corpse. And she fulfilled her bloody promise. She severed his head and submerged it into that exact bag of blood we saw at the very beginning of this explainer. The golden fracture was complete. Part 5. What survived him? It is, frankly, a shocking end for the architect of such an enlightened empire. I mean, nobody expects the great Cyrus to go out like that. But here's the thing. While Cyrus died a brutal, faceless death out on the harsh frontier, the foundations he laid down, they lived on. Today, his deliberately humble stone tomb at Passagadei is physically overshadowed by the massive ceremonial capital built by his successors, Persepolis. Persepolis stood for centuries as a towering visual monument to the incredibly multi-ethnic, tolerant empire that Cyrus pioneered. All of which leaves us with one final, haunting question. How does history's most tolerant conqueror fall victim to the oldest mistake in warfare? It really is the ultimate tragedy of hubris. The man who conquered the known world by deeply understanding and respecting diverse cultures was ultimately undone simply because he underestimated the fierce resolve of one unyielding queen. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer. I hope this leaves you pondering that incredibly fragile line between unmatched success and catastrophic overreach.